to another week of Storied Arcs. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are wrapping up Kill or Be Killed by Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips. I can confidently say this will not be the last time we do a book by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. But this is the last week for this one. So this is 5 weeks of podcasting, all culminating in an ending that, frankly, I did not see coming. And I'm generally pretty good at sleuthing what's going on. I mean, there's only so many different stories out there, right? And you're all kind of, cut and pasting, and you have something new to say, even if you tell the same story as someone else. Although I will say, I had another Death Note vibe, because there is a part in Death Note where Light, the protagonist, he's brought into the team hunting Kira, the killer. And while he's there, he's also being suspected of being Kira. But then a second copycat Kira emerges, giving him cover while he's doing. And so I was like, okay, it's just another similar beat. Brubaker didn't read it. These things happen. And like, that's a surface level, familiarity.
Yeah.
They were doing very different things with it, but it was just another similar beat. And again, the name Kira.
Yeah.
And let me be honest, when I saw, I guess in my real time thinking, when I saw the second Kira emerge, second Freudian slip. When I saw the second vigilante emerge, I thought it was Kira. I thought she had gone back into his room after he got carted away, found the red hood, found the shotgun,
put the pieces together, and
picked up his work to clear him. To give him a solid alibi, which is basically what the doctor, the doctor at the facility says, basically, like, well, right,
you can't
you have an alibi.
Interesting.
So that was where I guessed it was going, and I was very excited for that, but I was not disappointed by the end. And I think since we assume people have read the book, then tune in. Yeah. The last pages here, or the last issue, is the elephant in the room. So let's start there.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess what I want to, what you said was, early, you said that you didn't expect the ending, but there are only so many endings you can have for a story like this. And I guess the difference with what they did here is that they did the double fake out. It was, at the end of issue 19, he's dead. And then, oh, wait, no, he's alive. And we get this, what amounts to a fantasy sequence. And then it's like, oh, no, actually, I am dead. And I'm talking to you from the afterlife, whatever that is. So I'm curious to you, like, as you were reading that, what was your experience going through that as you go through the double fake out? What were your thoughts on it? Did you like how that went? And did you like how that reveal ended up being? Because you said last episode that you were pretty certain that Dylan was talking to a specific person, and you thought it was maybe like a doctor, a psychiatrist, and he opens the arc by explicitly saying, no, I'm not doing that. This isn't some therapy session. So when we get to the end, and
2 to 3 pages from the end, I thought perhaps it was him in the afterlife kind of haunting Kira, and that this was all speaking to her. But then I was like, no, that doesn't work with the prose of the entire series. He says so much stuff about it. So anyway, so I knew that I did not have a good grasp of the narration at the last panel of issue 19. That's how I died. That is present narration speaking in past tense about something that would end the narration.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, there's something here that I have just not accounted for, couldn't have anticipated. I did not buy the fake out, because he basically says, okay, better ending then. And it's clearly mocking you for wanting this ending.
Yeah.
And like, damn it, he got me. Like, I was like, this would be really cathartic. I like this ending where he becomes buddies with the cop, and he,
So at what point did you know, as you were reading it, that this was a construction, that this was kind of a fantasy, or did you get to a certain point and realize that he was making this up?
No, the two black panels, and then he's in the hospital bed that says, "Okay, better ending then." That feels like he's mocking the reader for wanting something other than death as the conclusion. And however, I still, despite knowing that, still felt myself getting sucked into it. But there is the like Captain America-esque pose where he's looking like Punisher on a rooftop.
Oh yeah, well, it's the Batman pose, right?
And the goggles,
he's in the rain.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I have this Mike Zeck like right behind my monitor. It's a variant cover from Captain America 1 by Coates' last run, and he's doing that Batman pose. So it's even though it's a Batman pose, I'm looking at Captain America do it all day long. But yeah, once I saw that, I was like, there is no way they did something this superhero-y. And they're clearly mocking us now.
Okay, yeah, okay,
because we're comic readers, and so it was like that broke the illusion for me.
Okay, I'm glad you said that, because I as I was rereading, I was thinking back to when I first read this when it came out, and all the buildup. It starts very plausible. Like, okay, you know what?
Oh, absolutely.
He's in the hospital. He's working his way back. He's making it with Kira, and then there's that scene with him and Sharp when it's like, oh, this is going to be like a Gordon Batman situation where I'm going to feed you. And he's like, that seems like, okay, now we're toeing the line. But then when you turn that page and he's in the rain, it's the full superhero pose. And I remember thinking at that point, being like, okay, we have gone too far now. And then I see that and I think back to the preceding 3 or 4 pages, and you see, oh, this is all the tropey big 2 superhero vigilante stuff. This is the Batman moment. This is the Punisher, Daredevil moment.
Yeah.
It's all of that stuff. And so, that was the exact same for me as I was reading it back initially, that I was like, okay, this is clearly not, I think you said mocking, which now that you said that, I think that's a great term that now I read it that way, and that they are clearly winking. It's meant to be this like hyper metatextual
right.
reference.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think they have disdain for those things, obviously.
No, obviously not.
But they are
built their career
mocking
doing that
your expectations.
Yes. Yeah.
That we've read so many origin stories that end this way, where it's like, oh, it's right at the brink of it, and he almost lost the girl, and he almost died, but then magically everything's better, and the police trust him, and they're feeding him something, and like
this is Batman Begins. Like,
and you were right.
What those pages are.
That we knew Sharp well enough, because they started that in volume 2 or 3.
Yeah,
2. Volume 2. We know her well enough. She would not tip this dude off. About like, oh, here's this guy's safe house. They don't cover the back. It's this is Dylan's fantasy. Version of things, because that's not the character that we know. Yeah,
the character we saw was like, she didn't care that, she was the one that put together that this vigilante was killing bad guys, but she didn't care. She was like, I got to bring this guy down, because I think we talked about specifically when her journalist friend asked, like, why are you so hot to catch this guy? What is it about him? And she says, because he thinks he's the good guy. And you can feel the disdain in her saying that, the disgust in that this guy would think that killing people, it doesn't matter if they're good or if they're the scum of the earth. This guy thinks by killing them, he's the good guy. That disgusts her. So there's no way that she would then be like, hey, my corrupt partner, the one that tipped off the Russians to the, this is where he is, and you can go, wink, wink, take him out. She would never do that. But in those build-up pages, you're right. There is this,
and in a Batman book, she would do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because the detectives and the police workers, that's the Jim Gordon
props. Yeah, that's the Jim Gordon is the one good cop who is surrounded by essentially all corrupt cops, and so the only thing he can do is partner outside the law with, the vigilante who's also secretly good. But the build up there, you start reading it and you kind of get lost, because it's a comic book and you're seeing all these tropes and all these themes. But then the rug gets pulled away and it's like, nope, actually dead. But I think that's a really fun said metatextual commentary, and it really only works because both Brubaker and Phillips, but specifically Brubaker, have such a long history of working in the superhero medium with specifically these kind of street level, quote unquote, real world superheroes,
right. And to be clear, I believe Dylan has to die. Like, I don't think there's a good story here where he lives.
No. Well, and now that you mentioned that, I was thinking back. The other thing I have my notes because I wrote down what I could remember when I first read it. When he comes back and he's alive, my first thought was, oh, well, okay, I guess that works. Like, okay, he can live. That's fine. But this does seem like it's too happy, as I'm reading those pages of him, he's rehabbing and you see the fallout from the other cops and all that. I'm actually waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then as you go through, then he has that meeting with Sharp, and then we get the superhero pose page. And at that point, I know it's all a fantasy. But in those first couple of pages, I distinctly remember thinking, okay, I guess he can live, because I did expect him to die. Once he was dead at 19, I expected him to be dead. But I figured, okay, he can live. I can accept that, but he can't be happy. Like, there can't be a happy ending to this. He can live, but there's got to be something. There has to be some level of consequence for him, right. Because the whole book had been about what does being a vigilante, what does taking a life do to a person? So he can't get off scot-free. He can't get off and be like, yep, that's good. I got shot, but I lived and it's all good. Happy live after, no consequences. So I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I didn't think it would be that it was all a full fantasy, but I said it wasn't until that superhero pose that I realized that, oh, he actually is dead. This is all a bunch of BS. But yeah, I think you're right that he has to face some sort of consequence, and dying is, that's the most fitting. It'd be much harder, I think. Like, what would they, if he had lived and not done the actual vigilante fantasy part of it, let's say he had actually lived, like what kind of ending would be satisfying? Can you even think of one?
No, I mean, no. And
being
honestly,
prosecuted and going to jail, is that it?
Right. I think it's more interesting, frankly, now, if they have ever decided to do a follow-up series to follow Kira and the Demon.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Which they teased.
Yeah.
And so even if it was an ongoing series, I think this was the point for him to die.
Yeah.
Because we learned everything there was to learn about him.
Mm-hmm.
We saw him reach his potential. He did the most good he could do with it, but he also did an incredible amount of harm.
Yeah.
And the system of justice that he subscribes to says that someone who's done the things he has done has to die. I mean, that's he lived and died literally by his own rules.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just no other way to do it. It's the same reason Walter White can't survive in Breaking Bad.
Yeah. Spoilers for Breaking Bad. But we should acknowledge that his last act is jumping in front of that bullet.
Yes, yeah.
But like his last act,
the most possible redemption available.
Yeah. So he doesn't actually face. In a way, you can say he doesn't actually face the consequences for his actions. That because he is actually still able to perform an act of like self-sacrifice. This isn't like he didn't die because he was this vigilante. He died because he tried to save somebody, and actually save what we think is a good person in Detective Sharp. So, even then he never actually faces the consequences. And we get that little conversation at the end between Kira and Sharp about how, she's not going to, report this, they're letting the copycat killer take all the blame for all this because they're not going to reopen it. And they're not going to she didn't want to put Dylan's mom through it. So Dylan just gets to die as someone who, he basically gets to die a hero, as someone who sacrificed himself to save Detective Sharp. And only her and Kira know the truth. So,
Right.
Even in public perception, he doesn't face any consequence.
No, I mean, not that he had a great reputation or that anyone will really think much about him for very long anyway. It's not like
that is true.
They're not going to build a monument to him at the hospital.
No.
Like, here's that one great patient we had that went on a killing spree against the Russian mob. In these hallowed halls.
Yeah, but I said in the end he does die, but he doesn't die. What I'm trying to say is he doesn't die. He doesn't meet his ultimate fate because he was specifically this vigilante. It wasn't because of that. It was because he chose to dive in front of this bullet. So he said, in the end, ultimately, he doesn't face any sort of consequence or justice. He gets ultimate.
Right. I guess the poetic or cosmic level of justice. That being said, I love this page. It's toward the beginning of 19. But he says this, the thing is, life doesn't have a narrative structure. Stuff just happens when it happens. We just keep moving on, which is, again, this guy and the hypocrisy, who's just finished delicately crafting the narrative order of events non-sequentially for the most compelling possible story. And he knows he's telling a story. Any shape your life has, you've added it later, trying to make sense of the chaos you spend your days inside of. Fair. Given his vantage point now, he is recapping all of this, trying to give it structure. Like 9/11 might feel the culmination of something now. Looking back, our minds turn it into a story, into thousands of them, really. And after 20 years of that, we forget that that day was really like, but I don't. So he's saying, there's no grand meta narrative. There are no archetypes or anything like that. It's all stuff we do on the cutting room floor of our own lives. Which, I see truth in that, but to me, it says more about Dylan than it says about life. And I'm okay with that. Like, I don't think this book has the type of commentary on, life or how you're supposed to live your life or anything like that. That's directly like that. They've written a very distinct personality to make him an interesting character that we converse with on these ideas, rather than, oh, he's the hero, everything he says is right and true, and we'll go live our lives like Dylan now. It's not that story.
I would agree with that. And I think this final arc, we get quite a bit of that. We get it in the opening pages of the arc itself in issue 15, when the narration is about it's a super grim look at the world, in terms of how, you're basically just all you're doing is living day to day, and how the world is getting worse. And
although he there's a poetic back end of that, right? Because at the end, he talks about how sweet the day to day, even the dark days were, because being alive is better than being dead.
Yes. Oh, no.
So he bookends it.
He does. But I think you're right. I don't think what Brubaker and Phillips are presenting is this is what your worldview should be. I think they've put the work in so you have a full understanding of where this character Dylan is coming from. And I think it's meant to be, you're meant to be suspect. I'm not suspect, but you know how troubled this guy is, both in like actual kind of the mental health issues he's dealing with, and the fact that he would go out and murder people. Even going back to the last arc, when he in his quote unquote resignation letter that he sends to the newspaper, which is like his manifesto, he talks about how he plays up all of that, how society is screwing over the little guy and all that stuff. But he even admits, like, it's not, it wasn't entirely false. But you see all that,
and he buys into his conspiracy theorist friend in the hospital.
Yeah.
Until a certain point, and then he's like, Well, I part with him on the aliens and
the lizard people stuff. Yeah,
But he's got the rest of it. Yeah, and it's like, at what point do you pause and say, the lizard people guy who thinks, the 1% have an alien ship hovering above us? How can you possibly say he's got it all right except like two little pieces that are, by the way, are huge?
Yeah. One would think that would negate everything that comes before it. Once you get to the lizard people there.
I mean, not logically, like just because someone says two false things after a true thing doesn't make the true thing untrue.
Yeah.
So, from like,
but if you're suspect,
logical syllogism.
Yes, I think right. If you're suspect of the lizard people, that should then make you suspect of everything else that comes before. But, going back to Dylan's worldview there, he talks about how he played up that letter, but yet that letter is what motivates or inspires the copycat. And we see the copycat killer is like, full on like alt-right, like super Nazi, basically ex-military, like super Nazi, basically. And Dylan's basically like, oh no, like you've he's inspired this guy, but he's doing it quote unquote wrong, in Dylan's eyes. He's going after the wrong people. He's, because he has maybe unwillingly tapped into this vein of society that is looking for a reason to lash out, and it's one of the very few specific real world comps. I think, again, we talked about earlier that this book, while set in the current timeline, is not meant to be reflective of exactly certain things. Now, I'm going to guess maybe
the line about Nazis early on.
Yeah.
Felt very 2017.
But also, like, I maybe if we went back and checked the weather at the end of like 2017, 2018, there probably was a blizzard. Maybe there was. And so he's tapping into some real world stuff there, in terms of the fact that there actually was a snowstorm. But yeah, they're going into the copycat killer and his motivations is really the one time where it's pretty explicit that they're talking about the way the world, I'm going to say the way the world was in 2017, 2018, but also very much where the world still is as we're recording this in 2022. So we know that isn't Dylan's worldview, but yet because he was playing this character and because of his actions, it has in a way been left to open interpretation and then misconstrued away from what his actual views were, which, I guess you could argue aren't that important because he's really just going killing people. So why do we care what his actual views are? We're not really sympathetic that, oh no, his oh so virtuous moral code and who to kill has been corrupted by this other person who just is killing the people that Dylan wouldn't like. It doesn't like he's not someone we feel sympathy for because his message has been corrupted, I guess. Right.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he feels territorial, first of all, the fact that he feels territorial over this message is insane because he fabricated the message on purpose.
Yeah.
Like it's not supposed to be his real views. So someone distorting a fake view he put in the paper. And it's like, secondly, I know he didn't want a copycat, but if you were trying to actually inspire people with your ideas, you would want to broadcast your ideas very clearly.
Yes.
And say, this is why these people had to die.
Yeah.
Again, the dog guy was a stretch, but for the most part, the people he took out, aside from his friend, although as the demon points out, his friend had a sketchy past. And he's a drug dealer, right? And he maybe dealt to kids or whatever. Mm-hmm. So there's all of those things. The other thing that I am now thinking about, there's scenes in this book where he's, or is this book or the last one? I think it's this book. He's walking down the street and the demon is just pointing out every wrong thing every person did.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's.
Do we now say that the demon is a projection psychologically in his head, or is it actually a demon now that we know he's speaking from the afterlife The demon has visited select but multiple people, possibly including Kira.
It's tough to say because it right after that's an early part of issue 15. But right after that, he gets into an argument with Mason, and what we see is Dylan fighting Mason, and the demon is egging him on. And then at some point, Dylan shifts his focus away from Mason and attacks the demon. But in actuality, he's still attacking Mason. But in Dylan's mind, he thinks
that
he's attacking. So what we're seeing is him facing Mason, fighting him, and then shifting his attention away to fight the demon. But yet he's in reality, he's still, so it's unclear.
Action panel confused me.
Well, and I think it's meant to. It's meant to. You are again still very much supposed to question the true existence of the demon, and I think it's meant to be where we landed. I think last time at the end of the last arc is that it's real. Dylan is seeing something, so that means it's real. Because Dylan thinks it's real, whether there's actually a demon there.
Well, and that's the big thing is like, it does not matter. And by this book, and this is what we need to come around to from last episode, his motivation.
Yeah.
The demon has nothing to do with his motivation in this one.
Oh,
I mean, the demon is tormenting him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And driving him, crazy, or making him think he's crazy, or, whatever. But he has moved well past needing a demon to tell him to kill people. He likes it.
Yeah.
He's doing what he wants now.
He admits to that. So what is I'm looking at my notes here. It's the orderly Perry, who he sees, abusing some of the female patients at the institute he's at.
And if you read the fuzzy grayed out text, when he's all drugged up, you see them talking about that.
Yeah.
And I was, I knew then, I was like, that guy's going to get it.
Yeah.
Well, he was talking about like, not to be too crass here, but this is just straight out of the book. Yeah. Like, that wasn't her belly button and that wasn't my finger.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And it was like blurred over. And Dylan didn't really pick up on it, but I was like, oh, that guy is so dead.
Well,
and then when I saw the grope later, and then he confirmed it, and I was like, that's 3 strikes for the reader, 2 for Dylan.
Yeah. But then as you see, Dylan is, what are we at here? This is probably I think it's in issue 17 where he basically, Dylan resolves like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to kill this guy because he deserves to die. And it's only because he recognizes this person as someone that he feels is bad, and he knows he can do it. And he even has this, this kind of existential later, because he doesn't kill him at first in the way he was going to,
right.
He was going to lead him out to the lake and then kill him there. But he has this existential thing of like,
and he's like, I don't even care anymore. He's like, wait, why am I hiding this if I don't care?
Exactly. Yeah. He starts thinking about, well, what's the next step? If I kill this guy, do I get away with it? Do I care if I get away with it? Does it matter? All he knows is this single focus. This guy deserves to die, and I'm going to do it because no one else is stepping up. No one else sees what I see or is willing to do anything about it. So I have to do it. But he's not thinking about the rest of it, And then ultimately he does come around, and there's kind of the makes it look like the accidental fall on the steps, and then he finishes the deal, and then he does get away with it. No one comes back and says
that guy gives him the idea for the steps. It's like, but it's just to stop handing people ideas. Like, he threatens, he's like, it's really easy to make it look like an accident around here. Until it's like, you know what, you're right. It is.
Yeah. You know what? Good point. Thanks for helping out.
So I was, and it sounds funny because it's obviously like a dark comedy, but I was laughing with Dylan at some of these moments, which just shows you how good the writing is, that I'm laughing alongside a depraved nut.
You're connecting with him. Yeah.
Right.
But no, I think, you're right about the motivation is Dylan fully realizes that, this is who he is. And then we see it too, after Detective Sharp shows up and has the interrogation there, and and we kind of get through all of that, and then the Russians attack. When I think there's he knocks out the first Russian guy and picks up the gun, and I think Detective Sharp something like, shouldn't I have that? And he's like, you ever shot anybody before?
Yep.
He's like, no. And he's like, well, then I think I better keep this. And he's so in his element, he just methodically moves out and takes out all the Russians with no problem. And it's only because there was the other guy who
sleeper in the car, the getaway guy.
The getaway guy that he got, he ended up getting shot. But you see him kind of in his element, like no fear whatsoever. Like he just knows what he's doing. And there's something very, very disturbing about that someone could be so cool and so in their element in an environment like that. But
I mean, that hospital thing was like pure John Wick.
Yeah, totally.
It was
totally.
He's really.
But then again, so was his attack on the step one of his plan in the last arc in volume 3, when he went to the brothel and just his whole point was to go there and kill a half dozen guys. That was the same sort of thing. Him moving, clearing rooms, clearing hallways, taking out guys. It was very John Wick. And and he has come to an understanding of just like, I'm doing this because I'm good at it. So the demon is there, but the demon is immaterial to Dylan at this point. Right. He's gone so far beyond that his motivation is his own, that he believes someone has to do it, so why not me?
Yeah. And in that moment, I think that's where he becomes the most relatable, likable version of himself. And it's also our last moment with him.
I think so. Because at this point he's doing it. It's self-preservation, but he's also there. He's trying to get Detective Sharp out of here, even though he has just confessed to all the murders. Like, he is, I guess he was willing to go back and face the consequences of his actions, because he does break down, and truly confess and lead and confirm Detective Sharp's suspicions that the copycat who was killed, what is it? Brock Thompson, is that his name?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
it's definitely Thompson.
Yeah, that he's not the real guy. So Dylan has confessed all this, and yet now in this moment he is trying to save the person who was going to, put him away. He was going to convict him. But he is. So this is the one time there is like a true noble, like there's a nobility to his vigilantism.
That, to me, I mean, that, like, I know you're not a big Daredevil reader, but that kind of situation happens to Daredevil all the time. Where it's the cop who's got him, cornered or whatever, he'll fight his way out and protect that cop, and that cop's like, "Why did you do that for me?"
Yeah,
and it's like, because he's a hero, dummy. Like, you just, you still don't get it. Now you get it. Are you still gonna arrest him? Although I will say, in Chip Zdarsky's first run on Daredevil, he's currently running a second run. The cop is saved by Daredevil and still arrests him,
which is how it should be. Which is how it should be. But
right.
But so again, in that moment,
but it was the fact that was a twist. Shows you how archetypal, the grateful cop thing is.
Well, and I think going back to Brubaker's time writing books like Daredevil, as we're going through the end of that issue 19, as he's making his way through the Institute, killing the Russians, him and Sharp working together, you can see how that would play out that way, that he is saving the cop who's going to convict him, and they're going to get out of here. And then the cop's going to be faced with that decision. Like, do I prosecute this guy? What do I do? And then it's upended by Dylan getting shot. But you can see again how they're playing with those familiar tropes. Anyone who has read this type of vigilante story, they're laying the same kind of groundwork that they would have laid in any other vigilante superhero story. And then again, throwing an inversion to it, saying that no, that's fairy tale stuff. If a real guy were to actually do this and he got good at it, this is the kind of stuff that would happen. There is no storybook, there is no cool twist, superhero origin story. That doesn't happen.
Yeah. So with this subversion of expectations, I'm wondering if you remember any of like the comic shop talk about this when the conclusion came out. Like, were you talking to other readers in real time? Were people happy with this conclusion, or was it like the Last Jedi type? We want you to subvert our expectations. Not like that.
No, I don't really, because I don't recall a whole lot of people who had read it. Our the shop that we frequent is it's a big two shop. Mostly, it's more heavily DC than Marvel. There are. I mean,
let's just be honest. It's literally called Up, Up and Away.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. But they have I know they carry a lot and stock a lot of independent publishers, especially Image and Boom. But like, I don't recall a whole lot of talk in the shop about this book. I think mainly because it's not a book that I think like regular comic readers would have read. It's a book for people who like Brubaker and Phillips. Like I think even at this point they had gotten to a level where people buying their books and reading their books are the people that are going to read their books. Like their audience is their audience. They're like a band that just sells, 2 million copies of the record. That's it. They're not, because they know they put an album out, every single one of the fans are going to buy it. And they know exactly what that number is. And when they go on tour, they're going to do the same stuff, the same places, because their fans are going to come out for them. They're not actually looking for, I'm sure everyone loves new fans. They want to bring new people in.
Yeah, sure. I think you're describing the Dave Matthews Band.
Yeah, I pretty much am.
No shade. Yeah, but it's just like, he's got a cult-like following.
Their audience is
I know people
audience.
Who go see 10 shows a year or something crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, there is, I mean, I actually, now that you think about it, it's absolutely Dave, that their audience is their audience, that no matter what, you're not expecting the audience to grow. You're happy when it does. But I think Brubaker and Phillips are just that team that, people are going to buy their stuff. And so I don't recall anyone at the shop talking about it. And
it surprised me that at least one of the shop owners wouldn't have, even if it was at the other location.
Because
I feel like a lot of shop owners read a little bit of everything that comes in just so they can be conversant. They can recommend things. But following it all the way through to the conclusion is a different story.
Yeah. I know a handful of shop owners around the country. And the dirty little secret is that they don't have time to read anything because they're running a business. A lot of people think that, you're an economy shop, you just sit around and read comics all day. Like, no, you're running a business,
Right. I mean, I'm sure the first 3 months there, just like the first 3 months of working at Chipotle, you have a burrito every day.
Yeah.
And month 4, you're like, oh my God, never again. Like, I know I get a free one every shift. I keep it. I don't want it. I'm so sick of it.
Yeah.
I think there's probably some little bit of thing where, working in the industry kind of ruins it for you. Cause so our shop owner will only read something now, the one I'm thinking of, when it's like exceptional. And the last thing he recommended to me was Mr. Miracle #1 by Tom King. Like that was the last one where he was like not peddling a book for profit, but was just like, this is insanely great. You have to buy it. Like he put it in my pool without asking because he knew I would like it. He's like, you don't have to buy it. He's like, but you want to buy it. And I was like, okay, so that's the level it takes. And that was like arguably a book of the decade from the big two.
I think without question, it'd be a top 10 book from DC in the last 5 or 10 years. Without maybe top 5 book, it's phenomenal. So the things I think the the people who run our shop, a lot of the stuff they read is going to be big two stuff because that's the majority of the market. So yeah, they're going to read a little bit here and there, and so they know what to recommend. When it comes to some of the independent stuff, that they stock it, and I think they know that a Brubaker and Phillips joint is going to sell pretty well. So I think they're less inclined to read it because they know the people who are going to buy it. They know people like me are going to always.
They don't need to recommend it. Yeah.
People
are coming looking for it.
And I think also so much of their stuff, much like people who have jumped into Saga or whatever, they know that it does exceptionally well in trade. Now, again, Brubaker and Phillips right now are releasing original graphic novels, so everything that's coming out is already in trade, but their stuff is just kind of evergreen that whenever you come to it, if you come to it late, you're probably going to come to it in trade. And so, you may be a few years behind, and they can direct it to, oh yeah, here's Criminal, here's Fatale, here's the Fade Out, whatever it is. That those trade collections and the hardcovers, the omnibuses, deluxe editions, those are going to be evergreen. So I don't think this is a book that carries a lot, at least in our shop, carries a lot of discussion real time. So I'm glad we're looking at it now, and if it's a book that people maybe have missed and they're coming to now for the first time, gotta hope they enjoy it and they go back to more Brubaker Phillips stuff, because like you said at the top,
Lord knows we will. Yeah,
it's not gonna be the last time we talk about this pairing. So but yeah, it is. I think this one specifically though would be of interest to people who have read, like, again, if you've read a lot of Batman and Daredevil and Punisher and even Spider-Man, and any of these kind of more street level superhero vigilante stories. Even though Spider-Man has superpowers, they're still like, something that Brubaker's talked about in some of his some of the promo stuff leading into the book, and he mentioned it's in some of the letters pages in the issues, that the Spider-Man has a huge influence on the Dylan character, because yes, we see him go out and do this vigilante stuff, but also like we see his relationship with girls and how it's not so great, and like he's got a roommate.
And the first thing he does is sort of a high school rivalry, high school grudge.
Yeah. We see, him trying to keep secrets from a paternal figure, a maternal figure. He's got a roommate hounding him for rent. So he's struggling in school. So we're seeing all of those real world problems. We're seeing those real world problems that make Spider-Man so relatable and so important as a character. So he's playing on those story tropes. He's playing on the regular guy gets pulled into becomes like a vigilante, which I think he references like Death Wish or something like that, like a Charles Bronson type character, but yeah, right. It is any of those. If you've read those superhero stories, like I said, I don't think this is a deconstruction of those, because I don't like that word as a description, but when those tropes and those story beats, I think it's a very satisfying look and a very interesting look at what being a vigilante would actually be, And like I said, I don't read a whole lot of Daredevil, but I know those story beats because I've read a ton of Batman, Right, I read a ton of Spider-Man. So if you're familiar with any of those stories, you're gonna understand what the base of the story is what it's sitting on. But when you see the different ways that it goes in a non-fantasy, a non-superhero way, in a more real world way, I think you're going to find it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you stated early on in our Paper Girls, how most comics are not really for kids.
Yeah,
in this day and age, Golden Era, obviously. They sold on the newsstands. Kids would get a nickel and whatever. To me, there's something childlike about the fantasy ending that he drew here, and the one that we frequently see in Batman, Daredevil, Spider-Man, whatever.
Oh,
they totally give people the impression that it is for kids, and it's like no matter how dark and gritty they get in the meat of the book, the fact that they always emerge to roughly the same outcome,
of course, yeah,
makes it feel like a weekly show for kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's what sets this apart distinctly as like for adults.
Well, I think what you're talking about is stakes. they're
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think
when you're reading, when you're reading Batman or Spider-Man, whatever, like they're never going away. Because when they go away, they're coming back. It doesn't matter. When Batman dies or when anyone dies, the tension isn't, oh my God, he's dead. What's going to happen? No, the tension is, okay, how's he going to come back? Make sure that's got to be cool. It's got to be new. It's got to be different because we know he's coming back because Batman has got to come back. He's always going to end up being the hero. It's always going to work out for him, even if it's not quite the way it always has before. It's always going to, because Batman's got to be published. Spider-Man's got to be published. It's always going to work that way. And that is that fantasy. And so not having that level of stakes in a story, I think you're right, is what makes it seem like it's for kids, because deep down that the character is going to exist, and so when Dylan comes back from the dead in the first half of issue 20 there, and he starts living that fantasy out, said if you're familiar with it, you can see it's hitting all those exact same tropes, all those beats, but then it's all a lie, because in this world, which is supposed to be our world, you don't come back from that. There is no storybook ending. There's no vigilante fantasy, If you go out and decide to do this, you're going to pay the consequence one way or the other.
Right. And the fact that after being grounded in realism for 3 trades, this ends with him giving a supernatural afterlife account of the entire story. Yeah. And that's still less fantastical than that superhero pose, right? Right. Yeah. There's something very telling about so many of the stories we read. And, that's why I'm glad we picked this book. This is different. Yeah. You're not going to go into a comic shop or a library and go through the graphic novels and find a lot of things with this tone, this setting, and this ending. And, I've kind of been kicking myself a little bit. I'm glad we did the Grass Kings one, but, since we recorded and released the Grass Kings podcasts, Matt Kent has completely blown up. Department H is going to be a show, which is a book I love. Mind Management is going to be a show. Bang is getting a movie adaptation or a Netflix show.
That's a super weird book. Very fun though, but if you can find Bang.
Yeah, but anyway, like 5 Matt Kent properties. Like the only thing that didn't get a sniff was like the Kent Jenkins projects. I know, like Apache Delivery, Grass Kings. But I was like, I'm so happy we did that, because there's still nothing quite like Grass Kings. It's a different kind of story. Offbeat setting, a story genre that doesn't really match the offbeat. Yeah. It switches genres, pivots back, wraps a murder mystery, deals with the family drama, deals with this like libertarian-esque state crisis, all this stuff. And I think Kill or Be Killed has the same kind of complex tapestry. It's got, it's got crime, noir vibes. It's got both mystery and thriller, mixed in, and it's got the psycho thriller, really.
Yeah. And it has the superhero veneer, because our main character is a mass vigilante. So there's that's kind of hovering over it. That is it a vigilante story? Is it a crime? What is it? Is it a supernatural story with the demon and all that? There's a lot of elements to it, but yeah, in the end, it's really just kind of a character examination of this person and what it does to someone. Who is the kind of person that would put on a mask and go and kill people out of a sense of justice? What would that actually do to someone if you were to be, the Punisher, if you were actually to go and do that, if you were actually Daredevil, minus the heightened senses and stuff like that, what would that actually do to a person, to them, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, again, he's talking to us from some sort of afterlife, right, which I do think is kind of funny in his narration. He's like, I could tell you more, but like, there are rules about that. Like I can't, there's a funny wink of just like, don't worry too much about that. Don't worry about where I am or how this is happening. Not important,
Right. And I think it's just another one of those things where it's like, that doesn't matter.
Well,
like
exactly.
it's not a story about that.
Exactly. Yeah. And
like the
did
point
they go
was
out of
not
the way
to
to
tell
make
you
sure
a
that?
lesson about the afterlife.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not
and I love when they're able to divert your attention, from something that might otherwise distract. To me, like the risk of doing a move like that is, if you have a dog or like I have cats and you like for the cats, a bird will land outside and I'm like pointing at the bird. I'm like, you're going to love this. And I use my finger and I point at it. And what does the cat do? It sniffs my finger.
Yeah.
Because my finger moving is the big event. And it's like, stop that. No, like that's what you're sniffing the thing that's pointing. Look at what's being pointed at. Yeah. And that would be like getting into a whole diatribe about the afterlife of the kill or be killed universe. And it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like,
and where is Dylan in the afterlife? Is he in this world's version of hell? Is he in heaven? What is he? Is he in purgatory? How is he talking to us? And so the fact that they address that and just be like, don't worry about it. It's actually not important. Don't go back and think about the previous 2019 issues on how I was narrating all this stuff. Like that's not the important thing. And for them to kind of go out of their way, because again, it's they're addressing the reader, so it is fourth wall breaking in a way. The characters aren't doing that, but the narrator is. The narrator knows that someone's reading this, and so for them just to explicitly say, "Don't worry about it," that's not the thing that's important.
Right. I think the only thing that's technically like, and you said like it's like pseudo fourth wall breaking.
Yeah.
But it's not like fourth wall because he doesn't know he's in a comic book, as far as I can tell. Like in a TV show or a movie, when someone fourth wall breaks, they look at the camera.
Yeah.
They address you. They know the medium that they are in.
Yeah.
And that's how they do it. And
that's what Deadpool does. That's what Gwenpool does. That's what She-Hulk. Yeah. That's true. They know what medium they're in. So it's more. It really is just. Yeah, he knows you are watching the scenes that he's describing, but he doesn't know that they're in panels and on pages and all that stuff.
Right. And I think in that sense, it makes it a completely unique narration style. Like no one else has done exactly that. A like dead character narrating life without, telling a tale to kids. It's like, it would have sucked if like at the end of this, he was sitting around a campfire and telling kids the story.
Yeah. The narrator knows he's talking to the audience. He knows he's talking to you, the reader. Doesn't know that you're a reader, but he knows that he is narrating the story and you're seeing the pictures in some manner. Like you're viewing this from, 30,000 feet or whatever. You're seeing these things as he's remembering them, as he's telling them. So yeah, it is. I can't say it is. I can't think of other kind of stories that are like that.
I've been doing movie comparisons, all throughout. And I think, obviously I alluded to Breaking Bad earlier with the ending, and it's like, it riffs on, and everything I listed is great stuff. Yeah. And it's, it's riffing on great stuff, but it's still, still its own thing. So anyway, another thought that I had as I approached the end of this, my wife asked me, I've been kind of updating her after I read each trade because I've accepted she's not going to read this one. She probably wouldn't like it. But I've been telling her what happens in each one. And she asked me as soon as I like closed this one, she's like, what do you think of this? And I was like, I think I just like really connected the dots here. But I think Alex really, really enjoys stories about death. So I don't know. Perhaps this is a discussion for another day, but I was like, your top stories are like Sandman, and you love the issues with death.
Yeah.
One of your all-time favorites is Day Tripper, where literally you just watch the guy die
every issue. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, Mr. Miracle's another one that it's questionable whether it deals with death or not. My understanding is that he did commit suicide on the first panel or like, in the first 3 pages.
Yeah.
And the whole story is told from someplace.
Like it's in his head.
Right. And so, and I think Tom King always has a dark lining. There's always death. There's always some kind of silver lining, but it's not like Hallmark feel good
Yeah,
style
no,
stuff.
it really does. It that is a line that permeates through the vast majority of King's work, which maybe explains why I like it so much, connected with it so much. You're, you're I don't think you're wrong about that assessment.
No,
I
well,
don't
and
know.
it's kind of it's a thing that makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah,
And so it's fertile ground
yeah,
for
it
saying
is.
something that no one else is going to say.
I think so, but I think a lot of it is a lot of those stories, specifically the ones in Sandman, I think very much specifically in Day Tripper, which maybe I would love to maybe do that on the show at some point, because I love that book. It is ostensibly about death, but those books are really about how death informs living.
Yeah, and I think most good reflections on death will be that.
Yeah, and you mentioned it briefly, that this arc starts off with a very grim view of here's the world is terrible, and then we actually get it. He kind of doubles down on that that's the opening pages of issue 15. He doubles down on that in the opening pages of 19, which you talked about, when he's saying like the real war is between wealth and accountability, that basically if you're rich you can do whatever you want, and that's what's making the world terrible. But yeah, then the narration in the middle of or towards the end of issue 20, when he's basically like, yeah, there are a lot of really dark days, it's really terrible, but you know what, all those are better than being dead, because you know what, you're not dead. Being alive and living through that is so much is worth it for all those bad things. And so it's an interesting pivot from Dylan, but I think that is meant to show, again, we're not meant to believe everything that Dylan says is the gospel truth, and this guy is the person you should be listening to. I do think you're meant to look at the world and make and be in conversation with it. I think you said that earlier, and I think that's absolutely correct. Because his observation of the world as it was in 2017, 2018, when these issues were being written and released, they're not wrong. And I think it's a view of that a lot of people had at the time. And when you look at the world now, as you're recording this in 2022, it hasn't gotten a whole lot better. So it is easy to be pessimistic and be cynical about the world. And he is, I think, shining a light on some of these not so great things about society and about the world, and where we are and where we're potentially heading. But for him to then also say, and maybe it's easy for him to say because he's now no longer alive, for Dylan to then say, but you know what, all that terrible stuff, you know what, not so bad, because it's better than being dead. There's a little bit of undercut to what he's saying there, because he's not living it anymore. He's not part of it anymore. But he's also not entirely wrong, that as long as you're alive, that maybe you have a chance to be part of the solution. As long as you're alive, you can maybe help get it better. And I think that's some of the undertone of what he's trying to say, that it's not maybe as bad as it seems to be, because if you're alive, there's always a little bit of hope, maybe a little bit of hope.
Yeah. Life is sweet too, sometimes at least. And it's full of possibility, even on the dark days. And that's, I think that's a great journey for his character. Like, that's a good arc to reflect on, to say he's not acknowledging that the world is, he's not sentimentalizing the world and saying, oh, it's, it's better than I thought it was. He's like, no, it still sucks, but life can still be great.
Yeah.
And
good
in fact, life is great.
Yeah.
And you can still enjoy, moments and days and times, and there's still, possibility and potential, which is a healthy and much needed dose of optimism for him, coming just too late.
Yeah.
He never learned to enjoy a day when he was alive.
Yeah. It took him being dead to come to that revelation. And I think maybe that, if there's any message that they're trying to convey, is that, try to reach this level of understanding while you're still alive, make something of it at that point.
Slightly Dickens-ish there.
Yeah. There's a there's a carpe diem aspect to it, you know?
Yeah. It's like being visited by the ghost of Christmas future or whatever it is.
Yeah. You could say that. You could say Dylan is a ghost of Christmas future saying, hey, I've seen it. I've lived it. Here's what it is. And here's what you can expect. But here's maybe how you can make things better now by learning by what I've already done.
Yeah. And even though he sounds very confident in his narration, he's clearly, these thoughts are still crystallizing for him. The fact that at the issue 15, there's no trace of his like, the world's horrible and whatever, but life is still good. Yeah. That does not come until he reflects on his own death.
Yeah, until he gets to that part in the story, he's still you're right. He's still recounting it in the moment, thinking like, yeah, you know what? During that time, it's all terrible. It's right. The world is bad. You're right. He has to. It does feel like in the story that whoever Dylan thinks his audience is, that this is the first time he's telling it. It does feel like, because he is talking about how he makes mistakes in the timeline. He's jumping around. Oh, wait, I forgot. You don't know how we got to this point. Oh, wait, let me jump back a month so I can tell you how we got here. It does feel like he's working it out in real time. Like this is the first time he is trying to tell this story. This is.
I mean, he starts in the middle on page 1. He's, in the warehouse, rating it. Which
we don't see until don't see in real
clearly
time.
In his mind, his magnum opus. It's like, this is what I hang my hat on for my life.
Yeah.
Is this
was the high point.
This mastermind stroke.
Yeah.
Which honestly, within the realm, moral qualms aside, he's right. That's pretty great. I mean, going into John Wick mode in the hospital is cool.
But it led to his death.
Right. And that was all like instinct reflex type stuff. The scheming, the planning, following the guys, the getting the informant,
all three of the steps, it worked perfectly. Yeah.
That was a mastermind stroke. And whether you're, watching a heist movie or, reading a crime book or something like that, that had to be the one. I was thinking like, I would love it to see this in like a movie form, but only if someone could put a little spin on it, like a Guy Ritchie, with a little like, the fast cut actions, injecting a little bit of the humor into the bloodiness.
That's a little too stylized.
I don't know. Not every,
also,
like most people, I don't know anyone who's like a diehard Guy Ritchie fan. I think he's just one of those guys where you sit down and you see a trailer for 5 seconds, and you're like, oh, it's Guy Ritchie.
It's Guy Ritchie. Yeah, his thumbprints all over it. It is funny, as we've been talking about this. I can't believe I forgot about it until just now. When this book was coming out and before it was finished, it was optioned for a film. And it was going to be directed by Chad Stahelski, who is the director of the John Wick films.
And there you have it.
And now it has been,
and that's pretty stylized.
It is, but it's a different kind of stylization than a Guy Ritchie film. Guy Ritchie has that kind of super glib and glossy look to it into his action sequences. But yeah, as we mentioned John Wick half a dozen times on this episode, and it just hit me that yes, that comparison is real. Now, as far as I know, as of right now, that hasn't gone anywhere. This would have been, I think in the issues, I think they talked about in the issues for this trade. So that would have been in early 2018
somewhere.
Yeah. Early 2018. So it's been 4, maybe even 5 years when that was first announced. And, I don't know if everything going on pause for COVID for a couple of years has led to it. But as of when we're recording this right now in mid-late 2022, there hasn't been any movement as far as I know on the Kill or Be Killed movie or any adaptation. I think it would make a really good like limited series. You could honestly probably do it in like 10 or 12 episodes if you're really slick about it.
It's not long. And in fact, I meant to ask you about the length of this because I feel like in the hands of many other writers, this exact amount of story would have been 30 issues. And like, I think like, I love my guy, Jeff Lemire, and Sweet Tooth, which it's probably been a decade since you read Sweet Tooth.
No, I actually reread it back in 2020 in the kind of early days of the pandemic. Sure. So okay. I reread it because it was I reread it before the show, the Netflix edit come out, because I hadn't read it since it ended. So
okay,
yeah.
So when you get to trade number 5 on that, you're at like the denouement moment. There's like a high tension moment in the present. Mm-hmm. The entire trade jumps back in time to give the backstory on all of this, the curse and everything. And the first time I was reading that, and that's monthly, and it was like, oh my God, are we ever going to get back to that climactic moment? But he knew he had you. Like, you're not going to walk away now, no matter how much it frustrates you. And the stuff was interesting. It just came at such an inconvenient time.
I was going to say it's the timing of that information, because that's not an unfamiliar trope in comics. Obviously, you're going to jump back, but it's about when that's deployed. And you're right. It's very disorienting at that moment in the Sweet Tooth story to then be like, nope, going back in time. We're going to and to make you wait for that is tough.
And what I kept expecting in this is I was like, in the hands of a different writer, we would have cut away. There would be 5 trades maybe. And the 4th one would have cut away. We wouldn't have gotten, Dylan goes to the mental hospital. We don't hear from Dylan at all for a whole trade. It's just Lisa Sharp's investigation.
Lily Sharp. Yeah.
Or Lily Sharp, piecing together her. And that would have been fascinating.
It would have been,
like
absolutely.
5 issues from her perspective, like picking up all of the pieces, trying to push through the red tape and things like that. So it's like, this could easily have been bigger, but it was also the right length. Like, I mean, I'm not arguing for it to be bigger. I'm just saying it could have been, and I would have enjoyed it. But I actually really respect what they chose to do.
I think you're right, and I think they laid the groundwork for that in the second arc with the Kira issue. And I mentioned then that they did that. It is a sojourn. It feels like a little bit of filler, but it's like, here's a different perspective on the same story, and obviously they set that up so at the very end of issue 20, the very end of this trade, when we go to that different narration box, it's a different lettering, different style, so we know, just because we have the familiarity from the earlier issue, we know definitively now we're in Kira's head. We have moved out of Dylan's narration. Now we know he's dead, but we moved out of his narration, and now we're getting Kira's view on the world. And it's very similar to the grim, cynical view that Dylan had when he was alive, Right. But because we had that set up, we knew we were in Kira's head, and this was her thoughts and her narration, and that takes us to the final pages. Because we had that set up, I agree completely. If the whole 4th arc could have been 4 or 5 issues. Let's say it was 5 issues, and each one of those was from the perspective of a different person. It's like we get another Kira issue.
Yeah,
we get a Mason issue. We get a Lily Sharp issue. Something like that.
I would have rolled. My eyes would have rolled out of the back of my head if I got a Mason issue. But yes, I know that plenty of people would have done it.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, and it would have been great. It would have been cool. But I agree with you that it would have felt. It all depends on when that comes, and that's the kind of thing. Maybe you expect out of a comic book, because it's so. It's kind of so ingrained, because it's
something a publisher would push for. Like, once there's title recognition, there's readership. They're like, don't end this at 19. Come on, push it a little further. Because can we stretch this out some?
That's the word there. It's a fairly easy way to stretch out a run, to be like, I know my narrative story. It's 20 issues here, but we can do 5 in here, and we can get more stuff out of it. And one thing it makes me think of is and this is not meant to be, I'm not kind of trying to denigrate this comic, because I love it. It's one of my favorites. Greg Rucka and Leandro Fernandez have a book out right now, or it's ongoing, called The Old Guard. Maybe you've seen
Oh,
the
yeah.
adaptation on Netflix starring Charlize Theron. It's great. And what they said from the start was, this is a 3-act play. You know, we have 3 stories in mind. So there's the initial story that come out, and then there's a sequel called Force Multiplied, and that came out, and we're waiting the 3rd one. But what they did in the meantime was, you know what we could do? We our narrative is 3. It's 3 story arcs. We're going to get there eventually. But they released an anthology miniseries called Tales Through Time, where they brought in guest writers, guest artists to tell stories about these characters at different points in their life. So, quick recap of the story: these are about people who are effectively immortal. They live for thousands of years. They regenerate body parts, whatever it is. They eventually die, but you know, they don't know when they're going to die. But you could live 5,000 years before you actually die. So by having this anthology series, they found a way to find 5 more stories and a whole other arc, a whole other collection that doesn't affect their ongoing narrative. But you get these. They are essentially filler. They're just for fans of the story and of the characters. And you get, you know, different creators in there, different art styles, and it's very cool. But again, it's a very easy way to elongate and stretch out a run. You get 5 more issues of sales. You get another trade that comes out. And nothing is disrupted in the overall plan that you set for yourself by saying it's only 3 arcs, only 3 stories. So yeah, you could have easily seen them say, we're going to go and you know, really explore how Dylan's choice to be a vigilante has affected all these other people. Maybe one of these issues is from his mom's point of view. Yeah. You know, you get all the people around him. You know, maybe you get one from one of the Russian mob guys, you know, the guy who's in charge after Dylan kills the big boss. And at the end of volume 3,
what you're describing, like we're describing a comic thing. Cause it's less likely, but I could see the big 2 doing that, you know, on like a title character. Usually you have to have your title character show up in every issue. Dark Horse is the one that I'm thinking of, you know, like everything's about like miniseries and building out everything into its own world. Well, where it's like, here's a 6-issue, 12-issue, you know, it's not even necessarily sequential. It's just happening in the same world.
You mentioned Jeff Lemire. I think the big thing over at Dark Horse Forum is his Black Hammer universe. This is everything that Black Hammer is. You know, he's told his main stories through the various main lines, but there are all these spinoffs, all these offshoots, all these one-shots and miniseries that just they just fill the world out, you know? And it's a way for him to get other creators, other writers, other artists, everything like that.
Matt Kent.
Patton
Oswalt.
People, his friends and collaborators to work and fill out this universe. And if you're a fan of it, like I am, you're going to buy every single one of those because you want to read it. You want to stay in that world. And I think that's one thing that Brubaker and Phillips haven't done for their more narrative stories. I think Criminal is the exception because Criminal is specifically an anthology story. Now if you've read all the stories, if you've read every issue, every trade of Criminal, you can see how things tie together. You can see characters that repeat and overlap, and you can see, you know, it's a multi-generational story. So if you read it all, you can see how everything connects. Even if it feels like it doesn't, it's always going to connect somehow in the overall story, but it's not really meant to be a linear story. So that's the exception. But in any of their other stories, this one here, Fatale, The Fade Out, Sleeper, Incognito, even what they're currently doing in Reckless, you know, there is one narrative push. Even Reckless is meant to be this kind of, pulp serial, different points of the same guy's life. You see how they connect in order, and you can see how there's a through line through all these stories. And so they're not interested really in padding out, if that's the right word, if that's the right phrase, padding out their story because they know it'll sell. Because you're right.
They have their next book, you know, probably ready to go. It's in the hopper.
And I think that's it too. They're not looking to overstay their welcome on any one of these books. If their story is 15 issues, it's 15 issues. If it's 30 issues, it's 30. You know, they don't care about, I think they care less about the brand name of the title, because that's not really what's selling it. The brand name is them. that they don't need to build out the Kill or Be Killed franchise, because the next book, whatever it is, it's going to be Brubaker and Phillips,
Right. And they're going to have something on the rack every month, basically.
Yeah. Or not currently, because they're doing these graphic novels, but yeah, at the time they're writing this, they're going to have something out there. The next book's coming, it's going to be in solicitations. You're going to see it. And in a way, they do want you leaving more. And I feel that way at the end of all their stories. All these kind of linear narrative stories, where you're thinking, oh, maybe it'd be really cool if they went back to that and did a little more. One thing they talk about in some of the letters columns here in the single issues is that they, in 2018, they were working on a sequel to The Fade Out, which to this day has still not come out. They have since pivoted and done a bunch of other things, but at the time they were working on it, which I think would be really cool. And it would be
really cool, but if I'm going to read more Fade Out, I'm going to want some resolution. But I realize it's right there in the name. It's the Fade Out, which is kind of what the story did.
It does that, but again, I think they know when to end the story, and that we have told our story, but that doesn't mean the story's over. We finished what we're going to tell you about it, and it comes to a conclusion, but there's always something more that could go there. And they don't always go back to it, and they hardly ever do. Because obviously, yeah, you're right. You get to the end of this and you think, oh, this is super easy, that you could come back to it and be Kill or Be Killed, something else. And you follow Kira now, that the idea that the story the story we're telling you is over, but the story itself hasn't finished. And I think they're truly kind of a master at that, of knowing when to end their story, but also leaving the reader just being like, oh, if they just had a couple more issues, like, where does it go? Because you've set something else up, but what they set up isn't the story they were telling. They finished that story already, so you're not going to get what happens the next, but you're always wanting it. They're so good at that.
Yeah. And speaking of knowing when to end things and leaving people wanting more, we should probably wrap soon. I mean, I've exhausted my thoughts on it. That being said, I finished volume 4 an hour before recording, so I'm going to have more. And this would be, another one like, Paper Girls or whatever. We're very open to doing a mailbag, or whatever. If people, find this a few months later and start emailing in questions. In fact, we may just do a catch-all mailbag at the end of the year for
it'd be good. Yeah,
all of the books we've done. And the next one, as we mentioned last time, will be Flintstones. And I think we haven't even penciled in our 2023 picks yet.
No, we're still planning that out, I think.
We're in negotiations, but I can tell you there are some longer ones on that list. And I know the unwritten, there's no way we're getting out of 23 without doing the unwritten, right?
Yeah. Which I mean, that's
12 or 13.
12. Yeah. That'd be a super long arc there. But I think it'd be really interesting to go on a journey.
Didn't ask us to do Astro City. Because that's way longer, right?
It is way longer. But I do think it'd be difficult to do one of those anthology series. Like, again, when we talk about maybe circling back to another Brubaker Phillips joint, again, Criminal is my second favorite comic of all time, but it'd be super hard to do because those stories are really self-contained, because it is an anthology story. It would make more sense to look at something like The Fade Out or one of the other kind of little more linear storytelling narratives. But yeah, Astro City would be very difficult, even though I do love that book. It's so cool. And again, if you're familiar with the superhero tropes, again, just like how that can inform reading this book, Astro City it takes all those things, all those ideas, all those tropes, all the setups, all the machinations of superhero stories from Marvel and DC and everything, and puts them all into a blender, puts them in a new environment, but yet it feels familiar. So it's such a great book. But the unwritten is one that we've tossed around. But I think we'll get to that at some point. But again, I think it'd be really cool to really dive into a months long I mean, that'd be 3, maybe 4 months worth of shows talking about that book and breaking it down. And
I mean, I think the other one we've talked about that would also be long and literally no one wants would be Morning Glories.
That would be so hard to do because that book is so weird.
I think some of these we may end up even like, I think if we did Morning Glories, we'd probably do 2 trades at a time.
I think so. Yeah. Cause some of them are pretty short there.
Yeah. Some of them are pretty short. Some of them are pretty light, even if they're longer.
But that's a discussion maybe for another day. But something to keep on the radar if you're listening along and like to know the books that are coming up. Those are some things maybe put on your radar for
put them on your Christmas list.
Yeah. Definitely.
And the unwritten, I think, don't be duped. They have a deluxe edition that has trades 1 and 2, but they do not have deluxe edition 2 through 6.
I think they're working on it. Yeah.
Oh, they're working on it. I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's been years. They're not doing it. I think the sales probably just weren't there.
Yeah.
Because everyone who wanted to read it already had it in single issue or trade. Those
trades do pretty well. They're usually pretty available in most places. And I'm sure your library probably has them too for checkout. So it's out there.
Very cool. All right. Yep. Well, any other thoughts on Kill or Be Killed or Brubaker for now? I'm sure we will be back in Brubaker's world in 6 to 12 months. There's just so much stuff there. We've even talked about doing Gotham Central at some point.
Yeah, that could
even
be,
that's a big 2. But reading The Detective in here really made me want to read Gotham Central.
Well, again, yeah, when the world expands out and you start seeing how Dylan's actions affect the outside world, again, that's so much of what Gotham Central is. It's about who are the people that come in after Batman? What do they have to do? So yeah, Gotham Central, Brubaker, Rucka, Michael Lark on most of the art there. That could be maybe our first actual big 2 adjacent, because again we're doing the Flintstones next, and that was published by DC, the Hanna-Barbera partnership. Not actually a superhero book, even though it is from one of the big 2. But Gotham Central could be a cool one because there's so much to talk about a Batman story that doesn't feature Batman. I think there's some cool stuff that could be there. So
everything I've heard about it is that it's it's what the show should have been, like the Gotham TV show.
It's what everyone thought Gotham was going to be, and then Gotham ended up being just another Batman prequel. So, which isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but I think if you read Gotham Central, you think, oh, there's a lot of really cool ideas here. There's a lot of really cool stuff. So
I had it on my Twitter account a year before the Gotham TV show that there should be a TV show that just follows Gordon and all the street level stuff in Gotham and the beat cops and the dirty cops and whatever. And I had this idea, not even aware of the comic Gotham Central. And then when the show came out, oh boy, I tried so hard to like it. And there were some good things, but it's how does this network allow this to go God knows how many seasons and cancel Firefly?
Well, there's just a fear with any Batman adjacent story that you have to have Batman in it. Nothing that exists in the Batman universe can really exist without Batman. That's just I think it's a constant fear of DC Warner Brothers that if you don't have some connection to him, it's going to fail automatically. You have to have that. That has to be your hook. And so it was never going to be what Gotham Central is as a story, but it exists in a comic, and it's one of the best out there. And so again, that's another one to throw on the wish list for consideration coming up, because I think you and I have talked about it enough, Mike, that I think we'll get to it eventually.
Seems don't like know one when. Of those things where
it feels it's inevitable.
A recommendation, even if we don't get to it.
Yes,
how about
definitely,
that? It's
definitely.
And I think another one that is on my agenda for next year, once we have a healthy distance from Underwater Welder, would be Descender
/ Ascender, both.
Maybe even a follow-up series later with Ascender. I don't know. I mean, to me, they're standalone enough stories, but I'd also be fine ripping off 9 episodes or 10. 10 or
they're
whatever.
they're
to
both
do
complete stories though, and they are follow up. I think it'd be, I think if we did one, we'd have to do them both in quick succession. So
okay,
but,
sold.
That's one I definitely agree with. Even if we don't actually get to it, another one definitely worth reading. Jeff Lemire, Dustin Nguyen, fantastic book. So
yeah.
Yep.
And with that, we will sign off and see you next week for the Flintstones. Well, probably the 0 episode on Mark Russell
and Steve Pugh. Yep.
Steve Pugh. So thank you for listening. Thank you for reading Kill or Be Killed, and we will see you for the next book.
Peace.